Good morning, my dear friends, students of the English Division, Cairo Higher Institutes. It's my pleasure to welcome you once again to our essay course. As we have discussed in our two last lectures, we had the definition of an essay, we had the definition of academic writing, we had the difference between both of them, and we came across a number of basics concerning writing essays. This is just to remind you of some basics about writing essays. Today, inshallah, we are going to continue what we started with. Today, we are going to talk about the goals of academic writing. The goals of academic writing. You don't write just for writing's sake. You write to achieve a certain goal. You write to have some objectives. While addressing your reader, try first of all to understand that you are required to obtain certain skills. What are the skills you need to develop, you need to acquire, to get? Basically, we are going to focus on a number of skills, mainly 6 objects, 6 skills that you need to develop your writing skills. The first one is critical thinking. The second is evaluating sources. The third, organizing ideas. The fourth, expressing arguments and responding to counter arguments. And the fifth is analyzing texts and providing evidences. The sixth one is writing academic English. If you try to develop any of these 6 skills, you need first to understand why do you need to develop each and how can you develop each one of them. So let's go ahead. Let's start with our first skill, critical thinking. As soon as you start reading, writing, talking, and speaking, you think. But the question is, do you think critically? In other words, you have been introduced to this term criticism. But what is the meaning of criticism and what is the meaning of critical thinking? If we are going to link between critical thinking and criticism, you need to think objectively. You need to think in a way that enables you to see the negatives and the positives. What is minus and what is plus? What is bad and what is good? So as you may form a good judgment. So this is simply speaking. But when we talk about this idea in an academic way, you need to understand that these 4 lines give you some details about critical thinking. And each word, each term has its significance, has its importance. So let's step by step analyze what is written before you. First of all, critical thinking is an ability. It means you need to have it first, develop it second, and practice it to make sure, are you ready to achieve what you learned, to do what you gained? I may read a grammatical rule, but when I apply it, I may succeed and I may not. So practice is the way that enables me to have self-confidence, Otherwise, I'll not be sure whether what I write is good or not. So it is an ability. And we are talking about an ability that belongs to your mind. So it is an intellectual ability. It is the work of your mind. And what are you going to be able to? You are going to try to be able to achieve 3 action verbs: to think, investigate, and evaluate. What is the meaning of think? To use your talent of the mind, to use your intellect, not to copy and paste, not to stop the operation of your mind and it choose all of a sudden without any grounds, without any reasons. And when you try to think, you will try to investigate, you examine, you try to build up a judgment. But the first step towards building this judgment is to investigate, to examine, to taste what you are dealing with. And then comes it in a very frank form, which is to evaluate. Evaluate, again, to have a kind of assessment. So you need to think, investigate, and evaluate. These 3 action verbs must be done in certain ways. They are not haphazardly performed. They are performed objectively, clearly, and rationally. What does each word mean? What does each adverb mean? Adverbs describe verbs. It means that you need to think, investigate, and evaluate objectively. Objectively means to see what is good and what is bad. To avoid any kind of prejudice, any kind of strict attack on something or advocacy of something else. Because till now you are trying to examine. When you find out, then you judge. But till now you just examine. So try to avoid any prejudices, whether for or against. And you must do the 3 action verbs clearly. Clarity is an important word for you as a writer and for your reader. If I'm going to write and the sentence is not clear due to one reason or another, how can I imagine that my reader will understand what I write? Do we have ambiguous sentences? If yes, there is no problem. So try to rethink, try to rewrite, try to make it easier for your reader to understand what you write about. In this case, you must be as clear as possible. And then you think, investigate, and evaluate rationally, reasonably. There is reason. Again, there is the operation of the mind. Otherwise, you can mislead yourself due to one reason or another. So, you need again to think, investigate, and evaluate. In what way? Objectively, number 1, clearly, number 2, and rationally, number 3. You need to do these ways of thinking as soon as you start analyzing facts. So, analysis needs the development of these skills. Otherwise, there will be some problems while you are analyzing facts, texts, or anything else, especially for you as a student of English literature, especially for you as a student of the English language. You analyze texts, you analyze different elements we are going to discuss later on. And these facts or these pieces of information you analyze must be obtained through reliable sources. So reliability is a very important term. Any source must be reliable and credible, and again this will be explained in a minute. To form, why do you do all these action verbs in that particular ways? Because you are trying to reach a conclusion, a judgment. But this judgment must be reasonable. It must have cause and effect. It must have logic. And that's why it is very important for you to develop your skills to do the 3 action verbs in these 3 ways. So if you try to achieve these elements, it is the first step towards critical thinking. You read, you conduct sources, whether they are internet sources or printed matters. Are all sources useful? Are all sources good for you to use? I think you need to develop your skill of selection. You need to select certain sources. What are the criteria for my selection, and how can I prove that the sources are good? Let's see. Sources must be reliable, credible, and accurate. 3 basic adjectives that describe good sources. Reliability means that you are going to have a source that is valuable, that is trusted. You are confident that the source gives you good information, and at the same time the source must give you updated information. It must give you a kind of, let me use this word again, trust. If you don't trust your sources, how can you use them? And what are some examples of these sources? We have books, encyclopedias, newspapers, articles, magazines, specialized databases, and scholarly websites. So, if you remember that some of these sources can be primary sources while others are secondary sources, my question to you, to use your mind, can you subdivide these sources into 2 groups and tell me which ones are primary and which ones are secondary? If you can't make up your mind, please go back to your essay book of the 3rd year and try to check what you have studied. And to evaluate your sources, I advise you to use this grab test. Whether my source is primary or secondary, I need to be confident that the source I use is a good one. And here is a test that gives me as a writer the chance to decide, shall I go on with this source or not? I have this acronym, CRAP, C-R-A-A-P. And An acronym is an abbreviation that is used by forming a new word derived from or based on some initials, some first letters of separate words. I have here 5 words: currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. What does each term mean? What does each term signify? Currency: when was the content written? Go back and try to search for the date for writing the information you talk about. And when was it published? And maybe at that particular moment for you as a student of English literature, I can link it with the relationship between the text and the context. The text you read, the words written by the author, whether he or she is a dramatist, a poet, or a novelist, and the environment which produced and consumed the text. At the same time, has the content been updated? If you need some figures, will you depend on numbers that are out of date? Of course not. You need to have some updated information. The second term is relevance. When you try to conduct some sources and you find a term that is similar to a keyword you search for, you may copy, you may read the whole source, but after a while you will calm down and discover that the keyword is repeated, but the meaning is different. What is said is different from what is needed. What you wrote cannot go along with what is included in this source. Sorry. So, why are you reading this article in particular? What is the relationship between this article and your paper? What is the relationship between the content of what you read on your source and what you need to write in your essay? Does it deliver what it promises, or are the language and coverage appropriate? Sometimes I collect information and I feel I need to insert every piece of information into my text. Is this right? Of course not. I gain experience step by step, and this experience enables me to decide, is this information relevant? If the answer is yes, I may use it. If not, it will be insignificant to use it. The third term is authority. And mainly speaking, I will talk about the writer, the author. Does the author have an academic degree in the field? So, for example, if you are going to criticize a play by William Shakespeare, let's say Hamlet, and one of your friends had an article about Hamlet, and when you go into your library, you find a book about Hamlet, and it is written by a famous British critic. Mainly speaking, which reference will you use? Of course, the credibility of the author is reflected on the credibility of the source you conduct, the source, the material you use. So, do we have an author with an academic history? In case it is yes, yes, please, go ahead. Is the writer experienced enough? Again, experience is very important. Does the writer use a systematic approach? do we have the sense that the writer follows a certain discipline or not? Is there a system the writers follow to deliver his information to me, to give me his or her information? And then let's move to the fourth term, accuracy. Has the author cited his or her sources? Cited here means documented, and citation means documentation. If I have a source, let me say if I have a book, this book doesn't list any references. It means that it is not reliable, it is not credible. But in case I have a works cited section, a bibliography, a list of sources, a list of references the writer of this book used, in this case the book will be credible and its information is reliable. Are most of the sources scholarly and academic? The publisher of information or the publisher of the book must be a trusted body, especially for me as an academic student. Let's say if I have a book published by an international organization, one of the organizations that constitute one arm of, for example, the United Nations, can I trust the information included? Of course, yes. If I have some figures or numbers released on a governmental website, do I need to trust this website? Of course, yes. But if the source is not academic, shall I trust it? I think it is preferable to use academic websites. Websites that are fed by very well recognized organizations, by governmental bodies, by research centers, universities, or any academic institutions. In these cases, we have trusted information. Has the result of these studies been replicated? In other words, are they noticed more than once? And are they conducted in a certain way that gives me an impression that they are accurate, or they are given just for publishing and that's all? The fifth term I have, purpose. And what is the purpose of the article? Is it to inform, to tell you something, or do we have an evidence of conflict of interests or hidden agenda? There is something that is not related to my purpose of writing and it misleads me, or it misguides me to a very wrong way. Is the topic controversial, attracting biased treatment? Do I have some debates? Do I have some topics that raise arguments and they are challenged by counter arguments? And in all cases, are they reliable and relevant to my work? So I think through the CRAP test, I can have a primary idea whether shall I go on in using my source or not. So please try to gather more information about the CRAP test. Try to have extra explanation of its content, but it is one of the let me say academic and the simple at the same time ways of evaluating sources. Organizing ideas, and I'm not going to stop here for a lot because You had this before while you were all students of first, second, and third years. You had the organization, the typical and the traditional organization of an essay that consists of an introduction, body, and conclusion. So I will not repeat this. But here I have some expressions of arguments and counter arguments. Sometimes you repeat yourself. Sometimes you need to have more words, more vocab, simply speaking, to use. Otherwise, you will be circulating yourself in a very narrow circle. Here I have argument and counter argument. And let me remind you that, as I told you in my lecture room, that we are going in this semester, inshallah, to focus on two kinds of essays. We are going to have the argumentative essay as well as the compare and contrast essay. So here I have some connectors of opinion. You can use any of them to express your argument and to challenge. In other words, to talk about your counter argument. So whether you have a prejudice for or against, I think you can use any of these expressions, and you have this source, you can have more expressions that are relevant. When we talk about analyzing texts, especially for you as students of English language and literature, you spend 3 years till now analyzing themes, plot, characterization, technique, and discourse. So what is new for you at that particular moment when you became all students of the 4th year? What is new is broader views of analysis. We are not going to make it limited. In other words, you need to understand not just the outlines of a character, but what is said about the character. You are going to conduct different sources which reflect different sides of a certain character, as an example. So, for example, you have a character. This character is controversial because of one reason. Try to examine why this character is dramatized as controversial. In other words, you are going to talk about the argument and the counter argument. According to some critics, this character is good. Why? This is what you will search for. According to other characters, critics, this character is bad. Why? Let me give you this example. According to many critics, the character of Hamlet is hesitant, whereas other views deny that he is hesitant. So it is your job to present the two sides, and by the end you can write your conclusion, your view, your idea, your opinion, whether you perceive Hamlet as hesitant or not. So, while analyzing literary texts, I think you are going to have more details. You will go in depth. You will have different varieties. You will talk about different technical device, whether music, stage directions in drama, or dancing, the use of light, some hidden aspects which it's time now to uncover, to investigate. And of course, by discourse, we are talking about language. When you express yourself after organizing your ideas, you need to persuade me as your reader. You need to convince me that you are correct. How can you help me to take your side, to adopt your point of view? You can use one or more of these ways of providing evidences. You can use personal experience. You can tell us something that happened to you or one of your relatives or anyone you know. You can use certain facts, and I remind you that facts should be taken from reliable and credible sources, and I have just explained this point. You can use some examples, especially while analyzing a literary text. You tell me that this character is good. Okay, can you give me some examples based on the text, either his relationships or his words, his actions and reactions, or even any aspects that belong to the development of his character? So exemplification is very important. To give me some illustrations, you can have experts and critics' views. While writing and while addressing a topic, you need to tell me what is said about it. Shall you go and search for insignificant persons, invaluable persons who are not belonging to our field and have some of their lines? Or shall you go and search for someone who is famous in our field of study, who is well recognized in our field of study? In this case, his views can be good sources for you. Sometimes when you write critics' views, you need to explain them. They have some difficulty, they are not clear enough for the readers, especially if the readers are not experts. Like when you write, for example, to one of your friends. In this case, you need to explain any difficulty, to explain what you borrowed or any point you believe that it could be difficult for your reader to understand. Of course, you have to insert some details because you are writing an essay, but please, again, the details must be relevant, must be enjoying some relationships with what you talk about. The ideas must support, the details must support your viewpoint. In case that you need to define a term that you believe it is difficult, please define it. There is no problem. You need to tell me the definition in order to enable me as your reader to understand the term. When you insert in your essay some words or some lines which are spoken by one of the characters in a novel, in a drama, or written by a poet, this is called quotations. So you may use quotations to copy certain words which are original to support your idea. And statistics, and by the way, this is a singular noun, don't forget, can be another way to support your idea, to give me evidence. So I think you can use in one essay more than one of these elements: personal experience, facts, examples, experts and the critics' views, explanation, details, definitions, quotations, and statistics. When you write and after you have tried to develop the previous skills, you need to focus on what is called academic English. Many of you, unfortunately, unluckily, they do not write academic English. They use everyday English, and even sometimes they mix English with one or another language. So it is not true. So what is academic English? Before telling you how you may develop your academic English, I must define it. Again, here I imagine that you are not aware of the definition of academic English. So I need to use the definition. So academic English is the type of English you need for reading and understanding your study materials, the sources you conduct, and writing. Here you are the doer about your subject. So it is the language of reading and writing. Is that all? Of course not. Academic English has certain qualities, has certain characteristics, like formality. When you write academic English, please don't use everyday language. The language you can see people or hear people talking to one another on the corners of the streets. They are not standard. Don't insert the personal pronoun I every now and then, unless it is necessary. So it is preferable, it is preferred to use the third person singular. Hamlet is seen as, Hamlet is criticized as, and so on. Objectivity. Again, to reach a good conclusion, a good assessment, a good judgment, you must be objective. You must write about what is good and what is bad. You must avoid any kind of prejudices. And the passive voice, like the examples I used when I was talking about the use of the third person. So Hamlet is seen, Hamlet is criticized as. Use the passive voice instead of the active one. If you have sources, give your paper reliability and credibility by listing the sources you conducted. And later on we will understand how we can cite a source, how we can document a source. So please prepare a list of references. This list includes the author's name, the title of the book, or the title of an article, for example, the publisher, the place of publication, the year of publication, and the medium, whether it is printed or electronic. And when you write, don't write in a hurry. Try to be careful. Try to be cautious. Every word you say, every word you write must be rational, must be one that supports your target. Otherwise, it will be insignificant, useless. There must be coherence. The relationships among the words, among the sentences, among the paragraphs of an essay is very important. Otherwise, the essay will be loosely connected, will be consisting of separate paragraphs which are not relevant. They are irrelevant. But please try to make it coherent, to make it clear for your reader that it is organized and that the ideas are related to one another. And the structure makes you a good writer or a bad writer. So well-structured texts, okay, are a good quality of, or form one of the good qualities of academic English, like the play, the novel you have, okay, the structure of the sentence, the structure of the paragraphs. And let me remind you of something. Sometimes when you wrote, when you used to write essay in the first or the second year, the text is not structured, is not good structured. Sometimes there is no conclusion. Sometimes there is no introduction. Sometimes you give me the idea without its evidence or without its illustrations. Sometimes the sentence structure is very bad. There is some grammatical mistakes. There are some grammatical mistakes, or some spelling mistakes. So please be careful. It's time now to calm down, to try to develop your skills, because you are going to write. So if you don't have the skills to write, it's time to develop them. Otherwise, it will be vain efforts. It will be useless for you to learn essay. I think it's now time to give you a kind of relaxation, and I just in brief remind you that today, inshallah, we came across a number of ideas which are related to certain skills you need to develop in order to be able to write academic writing. Till I meet you next time, I wish you a fruitful week, a fruitful, not just week, year, and I hope that you are going to make use of them. And please, in case that you don't understand anything, just take notes and tell me when I first meet you face to face. For the time being, thank you so much and see you next time.